Hi, welcome again. In this video, we are going to look at Unreal Engine 5 geometry scripting plugin and what we can do with it. For example, here we have some Nanite meshes. I can show you, and these static meshes are generated inside the Unreal Engine, and I can show you. Here we have a sphere like this, and this is a dynamic mesh that we are going to work on. Inside this, here we are generating a sphere mesh, but of course we can introduce any other existing static mesh as well. So here we have a rubber toy from Houdini. So this is my source mesh, and I can apply displacement. Right, then I have something like this. I'm going to hide this. All right. Okay. Now I need to give a little bit more displacement, like 20, and it's kind of visible over here. But this is not a Nanite mesh. It's a dynamic mesh. So now I'm going to transfer this mesh into these Nanite meshes. It's quite easy. I have set my target static mesh. You can put any static mesh over here, and then I can hit bake mesh, and it will take some time. So this is happening inside the editor. As you can see, now we have a Nanite mesh over here. I can confirm and show you. Right, this is a set of Nanite meshes. And the interesting thing is these meshes have collisions as well. I can play my game. Right, I can interact with them physically. Right, like this. All right, as you can see, like this. And I can show you the collisions by going into play collision. So you can see it's sort of boxes, but I'll show you a way to customize these and get the best shape that we want to have. Here our end goal is not to show you how to do this, but here we are trying to explain what are the basic elements of the Unreal Engine 5 geometry scripting plugin and what you can do with that. But after that, once we have the foundation, we can do very interesting things. For example, here we have a line that I imported from Megascans. Now I can cut it like this, and this is simply using the geometry scripting. We are not going to use any chaos distractions or anything. Here this is a runtime system. You can change it inside the game as you like. For example, I can change the cutting plane like this. Also I can rotate this as well, and I can simply play my game and cut it like this. Also, this is not specific to this static mesh. Of course, I can put any sort of mesh I like. So here we have another fruit like this, and I can simply cut it like this as well. So I can change the material inside material, and there are a lot of customizations that you can do. So the idea is, if you have some imagination on what you want to do, then basically you could actually do it inside the engine. So that's the whole goal, and that's what we are trying to do here with this series. In this video, we are not trying to show you how to do this, and the reason is there are some things you have to learn more about booleans and so on. We're going to touch that soon in a different video, but here we are trying to lay out the foundation and get you up and running so you can start working on complex and amazing things. And finally, all the source files will be available via Patreon. So you can go to our Patreon page and try to grab these files. And of course, you can contribute us and try to encourage us to create content like this quite often. All right, let's get started. First thing is you need to enable a plugin called Geometry Scripting. Go to Edit, Plugins, and search for Geometry. Here we have a plugin called Geometry Script, and simply click this checkbox and enable that. So after that, you have to restart your engine and try to do that. And then let's create a new level, basic level, so we can start from scratch. I'm going to save this as my tutorial level. Right, and then let's create a new folder for tutorial, so I can put all the tutorial stuff inside this directory. Right, the first thing is we need to create a actor blueprint class. And here I forgot to mention, you need to have a basic understanding of how Unreal Engine works and how the blueprint system works in Unreal Engine. And if you have a proper understanding, this video will be really easy to follow. But if you don't have that understanding, it's still possible to follow, but it will be hard because I'm not going to explain some of the specific things related to Unreal Engine and blueprints, right? And then from the actor search area, and try to search for actor called generated. Here we have an actor called generated dynamic mesh actor, and that's the actor we want to use. I'm going to head select. So we can give it a name, any name we like. I'm going to set hello geo. I'm going to double click and open that. And this is where I work with the geometry and trying to create interesting things. Here I have arranged my editor window in quite a different way. Here I have placed my viewport into this area. and I have put my components and blueprint section over here, and that's helpful since we are working with geometry. We need to see something all the time maybe. And first thing, let's create a sphere and try to get the basics of this geometry scripting system. I'm gonna go to the event graph, right click and search for an event called on rebuild generated mesh. Right, and this is something similar to the construction script, but this will run in a very specific way that it won't affect the performance of your engine, especially working inside the editor. And always try to use this event. In this case, we have something called target mesh, and this is a dynamic mesh that we can add geometry into this mesh. For example, I can grab this and search for append sphere box. So here I simply append a sphere, and this is called a sphere box. It's a box and it will deform as a sphere. So here we have radius and so on, and I can set the center as base, and I'm going to hit compile. I can save it. So now you can see the geometry and the sphere over here. I can also drag that into my scene, and you can see it like this. All right, we have created a simple sphere. Now I'm trying to displace this. It's quite easy. I'm gonna go to the wireframe mode. So this is my wireframes, and here of course you can put the steps X and Y and Z and try to increase some geometry, but I'm gonna subdivide instead of that. To the target mesh and search for subdivide. And here we have a couple of subdivision options. In this case, I need more triangles, not to smooth the mesh. So I'm gonna set this apply triangle loop sub D or uniform, or this one. If you put the Catmull-Clark subdivision, it will try to smooth the mesh, and that's not what we want in this case. So I'm gonna select this one. About subdivision, let's try to put out 3 times. Right, and it will give me enough geometry that I can work with, I guess so. Then I'm gonna get this target mesh, and I can search for displace. So we have a node called apply displace from texture map. So we are gonna use a texture to displace this mesh. Now I'm gonna promote this texture into a variable. I'm gonna say that displacement texture. I'm gonna hit this icon, and it's now visible on the editor. Compile and save. Right, then I'm gonna right click on these options and split struct bin. And here we have something called option magnitude. So this is the displacement amount. I'm gonna also put that into a variable. Also I'm gonna expose that, and I'm gonna rename it as displacement magnitude. If we compare it over here, nothing happens because we don't have any textures. But of course, now we go to the editor. I can put some textures and work on this. Now I have already downloaded some Megascan textures, this like pebble texture. So I can try to displace using this texture. And here with the Megascans, now we have pack texture. So this is basically ORDP. So basically the third channel contains a displacement texture. So I'm going to drag this one and put it to my displacement texture. And I'm going to set the magnitudes into 10. Right, now it will try to displace like this, and you can see some geometry like this, and it's not it doesn't look nice. And the reason is we are not generating normals. So now let's try to generate some normals. Then I'm going to grab this and search for normals, and here we have something called recompute normals. Right, and I'm going to compile and save it, and now we have something interesting, but still looks weird. And the reason is here our displacement texture in the third channel, but here in this case we are only picking the first channel. So options image channel, so we need to put this to 2, so it will pick the third channel. Right now we have something interesting. I can put the material over here. Now yeah, it looks exactly what we need. And of course, if you like, you can add more geometry by increasing the subdivisions to 4, and then it will try to give more details. Okay, now let's try to move this mesh into a different place like this. If you see it properly, it's really hard to move it here. I'm not sure that you can see on the video. The reason is, so now every time I move this mesh, it will try to run this function. So it's similar to the construction script, and this is super costly because we are doing subdivisions, and that's why it's kind of slow. But we can easily fix that. So here's how to do that. I'm gonna select everything I wrote over here, right click, and I'm gonna hit collapse to function. And now let's give it a name like apply displacement. And then I'm gonna enable this checkbox call in editor, so I can access this from the editor as well. But if I compile that, but if you search over here, I don't see this button, and the reason is this function has an input. So that's input is the target mesh. If you have an input over here, you cannot call it from the editor. So we're gonna uncheck this wire, and I'm gonna delete this target mesh. Right now we can call it from the editor, but of course we cannot compile. The reason is we need to put some target mesh over here. We can easily get that, and this target mesh is the dynamic mesh of this dynamic mesh component. So we can grab this dynamic mesh component of this actor and try to get it, get dynamic mesh. So, and that's same as the target mesh that you have earlier, like this. All right, I'm gonna compile and save it. Then it will give me another warning. I can click somewhere here, and the reason is now this rebuild event, and I'm gonna try to call this, but there is no target mesh. So I can click this and simply hide this. But of course, I'm not gonna call this right over here. Now I'm gonna call this function in the editor as I need it. Okay. Now if I select over here, there's nothing inside my actor, and the reason is we are not generating anything inside this event. But now instead of that, we have a button called apply displacement. I can click this. Now it will create the displacement and our texture. Of course, I can play my game and it's still there. But let's try to move it here and there, but now it's gone. So every time I change my position, so basically every time I try to run this event, and it will reset all the geometry, and yeah, and that's why it looks like this. Of course, we can change this. Select the actor, the root component over here, and then we have an option called reset on rebuild. Try to uncheck that. Now it won't reset every time you do some changes. It will try to interact with the existing mesh. Okay, that's pretty cool. But now we have a problem. So here in this case, we are trying to add a new mesh every time, and that's not nice. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm going to reset this existing mesh every time I click this apply displacement. It's pretty easy. I'm going to grab the return value from this dynamic mesh and search for reset. Right, and simply connect it like this. And now we are ready to go. I can compile, save. I can apply displacement once. Now I can move it anywhere I go, and it's quite fast, and yeah, this is exactly what we need. I can play. Yep, everything looks normal. Now we have a mesh, but we don't have any collisions. Now let's try to generate some collisions into this mesh so we can interact with that. So it's quite easy. If you go to this function at the end, simply grab this target mesh after the recompute normals and search for collisions. Here we have a function called set dynamic mesh collision from mesh, but it's quite mouthful. But anyway, you can click that and you can grab this node like this. It's not complete. So basically we are trying to set a collision mesh based on this our target mesh into this component. Okay, so I'm going to grab this component because the collisions are exist inside this component, not inside the mesh, because this collision is also another mesh, so it needs to stay in a place like this. Okay, I'm going to connect this mesh component, dynamic mesh component. Save. All right, everything looks good. And here we have something called options. I'm gonna split that. So now we have some of the options. So here the important option is the method, how we actually create these collisions. By default, it will choose the mean volume shapes. It's a good default value. And there's another one called convex hulls, and that's also important in certain areas. So there are some other algorithms you can go through and experiment. In this case, I'm gonna compile this, save, and I can play my game. But you can see we don't have any collisions, and the reason is now we need to click this apply displacement once, because everything happens only if you click this button, and that's how we configured it. Right now we have collisions. All right, now we have some collisions, but we have no idea how it looks like. And here's how to do that. Go to your select mode and go to the modeling tab. Scroll to the bottom and select the PL inspect this button. And before we do that, try to select your dynamic mesh and then select this PL inspect or P inspect, I guess. Yeah, I can see my collisions. It's it's not a sphere, it's like a volume, I guess. So you can see like this. So like a primitive. It's not a typical mesh, but it's like a volume that you can see. Like quite interesting. But let's say we need to change the algorithm. Here's how to do that. And here let's select another algorithm. I'm going to select convex hulls, and I'm going to compile and save it. But in order to see this, I need to complete this and select this again and apply displacement. Now we have the actual collisions, and then I can hit P inspect, and now we can see something, but not something represent my object. And the reason is here we are limiting the convex hull target face count into 25. In this case 25 is not enough to make a collision for this one, but of course we can increase this number. Let's say 100. Compile, save, and then again I need to run apply displacement, complete this, and then select it again. All right, now we have something something representing this sphere that we have. I can play my game, right? Yep, like this. Of course, if you like, you can enable the simulations, and inside this component we have option called simulations, like simulate physics. Compile, save, and now you can interact with this sphere like this. Yeah, that's also possible, just like any static mesh actor. Up until now we have created the source mesh inside our actor, but usually we don't always work with a sphere. We need to use a custom geometry that we created maybe in another software, for example Houdini, Maya, and so on, or maybe Blender. So here's how to use that. And go to your blueprint, right? And this is the place that we create our source mesh. So I'm gonna select this, I'm gonna right click, and I'm gonna collapse it to a function right now, and let's give it a name like get source mesh. And I can go inside, and right now this function looks like it doesn't do anything, but right now we're going to use a static mesh as well. If there's a static mesh, we're gonna use that as a source mesh. If not, we're gonna use a sphere. All right, here's the idea. So let's create a variable, and I'm gonna give it as a source static mesh, and I'm gonna select the type as static mesh, and then I'm gonna click this icon, and now it's visible on the editor. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to grab this into my scene and get this one, and I'm going to right click on select convert to validated get. So it's a very interesting function, comes with Unreal Engine 5. So it's a built-in if function. So if valid, you can do something. If not, you can do something. Now I'm going to connect my execution flow over here. If this is valid, and yeah, let's use this mesh. If not, and this is the fallback, right? And then if it's valid, I'm going to grab this and search for copy from, we have a function called copy mesh from static mesh, right? And this is the static mesh, and this is our dynamic mesh. So basically we are asking to copy our static mesh into this dynamic mesh, and with success, usually it is success always, and if not, you can simply show a message, but in this case I'm gonna simply connect this, and this is our updated dynamic mesh, right? And then so nothing happens if you click the apply displacement, because now we're using the fallback. But now let's try to use a static mesh that we already have. I have a static mesh over here. I created this rubber toy. From Houdini, I'm gonna drag that into source mesh. I'm gonna hit apply displacement. Then it will take a time because it will try to generate too many geometry. I think the reason is, you can see it's a huge amount of geometry. We don't need that because we're trying to subdivide is quite high. So I can go to my apply displacement function, and I think here subdivision is, let's stick with two levels of subdivisions, because otherwise it will be quite costly, because this original mesh has some geometry in this. Right, now I can select this again, apply displacement. Now if I go to wireframe mode, it's quite workable. Now let's try to increase the magnitude of this one. Let's put it like 30. All right. So now we have the rock toy. Okay, we can we can name it like this. All right, now this is a mesh. So it's a dynamic mesh. It is not a Nanite enable. You can't see anything. It's just a mesh, dynamic mesh. Now let's convert this into a Nanite mesh. And there are a couple of ways to do that. You can select this mesh, go to your modeling tools, and search for transform, and here we have something called convert, and you can select the new access location into current folder, and I can hit convert and accept. Then it will create a mesh like this, right? And this looks pretty nice. So that's the way we are trying to do it using this tool set. But of course, we can try to do it by ourselves using the blueprints, and let's try to do that as well. I'm going to delete this mesh. All right, now I'm going to go to my blueprint, and let's create a new function called bake mesh. I'm going to compile and save it, and I'm going to grab my dynamic mesh. You can get the component and search for get dynamic mesh, connect the execution pin, and get this and search for static mesh. And here we have a function called copy to static mesh. So I can move this into a static mesh, right, like this. In this case, we had to provide a static mesh. I'm gonna grab this and search for promote to variable. So I'm gonna rename this as target static mesh, and I'm gonna show that into the editor as well. Compile and save it. Now I'm gonna set this into my default sphere because it's easy to work with. Set the displacement to 10. Now I need to create an empty static mesh so I can work with this one. There is no way I can create an empty static mesh, but I can try to create some base static mesh from the modeling tools box, current folder, and put it somewhere on the screen and complete. All right, I'm gonna go out from these modeling tools, and then I can double click on this actor or the static mesh, and here I can enable the Nanite support, and as well as I'm gonna search for simple, and I'm gonna change the collision type. By default it's as a complex collisions as simple. I'm not going to explain right now, but this is not gonna work if you're trying to simulate this actor, simulate this static mesh. So in this case, I'm going to select this into the project default or the simple and complex, or simple and complex. Then I can save this. All right, now everything looks good, right? And then I'm going to use this as my target mesh over here in my dynamic mesh. So I'm going to put it like this so I can differentiate both meshes. Here I'm going to set the target mesh as like here. And I can, I cannot see the bake mesh. The reason is I haven't exposed it yet. Now I'm going to select my bake mesh function. Here we have a option called call in editor. I'm going to select that, compile, save this. Now we have this function. I can click that. Right now you can see it will simply bake the static mesh into here. And now I can basically assign any material I like. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the player collision mode. Right now I cannot see any collision on this because we don't have any collisions, so that's why it looks empty. Now let's try to add some collisions. You can grab this dynamic mesh and search for collisions, and here we have something called set static mesh collision. Earlier we select the set dynamic mesh collisions, but now here we have a static mesh. I'm going to select this, and if it's success, I previously have this, and now then I can connect this target static mesh over here. All right, and now again, just like earlier, we have some options. We can select the algorithm we like. In this case, I'll go with the default one. Right now I can hit the bake mesh function again. Then I can show the player collisions. All right, now we have the collisions, as you can see over here. All right, very cool. So now all I have to do is I can select this, and you can search for simulate, and this is a static mesh actor. I can hit the simulate physics. I can play with this mesh, and it's a Nanite mesh. If I go to the Nanite visualizations, it's a Nanite mesh. All right, this is the end of the geometry scripting getting started tutorial. I hope you have a good understanding of how to use the geometry script, and I hope this is a foundation for very interesting things that we try to do in the next couple of weeks. Also, I need to give a proper thanks to the co-developer of this project, I guess, Ryan Schmidt, and he's quite genius in the mesh modeling area, and he's really helpful on Twitter and YouTube and try to create very interesting short videos that cover a lot of things. You can also go through his video tutorials and try to see what we can do with the geometry scripting plugin and try to understand a lot of interesting things. Okay, finally, we are trying to do this in the next couple of lessons. So we need to talk about booleans first, and also we need to talk about creating additional dynamic mesh component and work with that. So after we have done that, we can of course do that. And after that, we can do very interesting experiments and so on, and of course try to do in-editor modeling as well. So just like you do with Houdini SOP operators and the Blender geometry nodes. And of course you can get all the source files from the Patreon. Check the link in the description and you can grab that. Also you can support us, and that will be really helpful for us, so it will encourage us to make videos like this. And yeah, all right, see you soon with something interesting. Bye.